Hello, welcome to the DCX podcast, where I interview leaders in the customer experience space and how digital is changing the landscape and how you can leverage these changes for success in your business. Today, I'm excited to be talking with Matt Benjamin, former partner, customer engagement, and automation and transformation lead at Mercer. He has over 20 years of experience constantly evolving omni-channel digital experiences, contact center operations and enablement, and has led teams as large as 1,000. As transformation and automation strategy leader, he led the global strategy focused on artificial intelligence and digital customer engagement. Welcome, Matt, to DCX Podcast.
Thanks, Mark. Pleasure to be here. Congrats on the launch of the DCX newsletter and the podcast. Content has been awesome so far. So the bar's been set pretty high. Hope I keep the momentum going for the crowds.
Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. As I've been doing in these podcasts, I've been talking about how digital is impacting customer experience. Today, we want to talk about the health insurance and retirement space. And I really want to look at maybe three areas to discuss. So one is company organizational structure and how you gain support for customer experience at the C level. Your time at Mercer and the digital transformation that you led there, and then what you see coming in the future. There really needs to be C-suite alignment on the commitment to investing in customer experience. How did you work to gain that alignment at Mercer?
Yeah, great question. And I'd say, yes, absolutely right. Senior leadership alignment, executive alignment, commitment, absolute must if you're really going to move the needle forward within the organization. Before we jump right to executives, though, Mark, I think it is important for a second and worth noting that I think on the other end of the spectrum, there's actually another really important commitment needed, and I think that's from the colleagues that are kind of on the front lines or maybe in the back office or otherwise that are also like driving and supporting the experience day in and day out for the actual customers. So, be it your product and technology teams, be it your service center, your call center, your operations, et cetera. But what's great is if we talk about senior leadership, executive leadership, as well as those colleagues, I think they both share actually a really common need in order to gain that alignment and commitment. And I think above all else, that's really a compelling and a strong vision, and one that is actually focused on CX and digital. It's that underlying reason that's going to give all of them a reason to move forward with whatever it is you're after, and of which each of them is going to have some pretty specific needs tailored to their group, right? If we think about executives, they're going to be looking probably for some level of top line revenue growth, client retention movement in the right direction, maybe operating leverage or efficiency type of plays. Whereas maybe your frontline colleagues are more tied to that sense of purpose or passion for being in the seat and coming to work every day, and the positive culture that's really building. So I've always felt that vision is that one thing that's going to align all of those parties, becomes super important in order to move the needle with CX and digital transformation, even though sometimes crafting that vision can be easier said than done. It took my former team and I a little bit of time actually to really land the plane on what we wanted that vision to be around CX and digital. Lots of great evaluation, lots of great discussion about what was really important to our customers. Analyzing the data, doing the research, listening to service center calls, talking to colleagues, all of that. And as we evaluated the customer journey, kind of different macro and micro moments along there, once we understood that, we were able to put something together that we felt was pretty compelling. A lot seemed to fall in place post that. And I think in the health and the retirement space that we operate in, we decided that there was really like one thing that matters above all else, and that was to make sure that we were really making a difference in people's lives that we interacted with. And when we were doing it by providing some really good care and making that experience like as easy as possible. So in so many words, that kind of became or morphed into that vision that we leveraged around a reimagined, redesigned CX digital agenda. And from there, that's where our business cases and our investments were built. That's where our plans for org structure and redesign kind of came from. and how we kind of painted a roadmap for the future of CX and digital. That's what it was all anchored around. So I think that is the one. I believe that is the one thing that is really what's needed to start the process of commitment alignment for all aspects of the organization.
Right. And I would say through that commitment drives prioritization, investment, alignment. These types of projects can take years. How do you face those challenges over time to maintain momentum, to keep the right things at the right level of priority, to maintain the investment? Again, I think it's something to do with the organization and the commitment at the top, and the support for someone like yourself, who's the evangelist really of the work that's going to be done.
So a couple things. Any good investment starts with a solid business case. Any good business case is going to yield some form of improvement in revenue or cost, all while you're actually moving the needle towards a better experience for customers, right? Supported by maybe some other KPIs, be it NPS, CSAT, turnaround time, whatever it might be that you're after. I think a challenge with CX related investments, probably before digital kind of crept into the scene, has been the risk to be assumed with actually realizing the benefit or the gain.
Mhm.
We're going to put these dollars towards a new CX some technology that's going to do X, Y, and Z, and sales teams, you need to sign up for multi-million more dollar incremental sales to potential clients or in revenue. Service teams, you need to shave millions of dollars off your operating budget. I've never met a call center leader that just kind of raises their hand and be like, "Oh, this is a great idea. Take away my staff. We'll be all set. These things are going to fix everything for
Right,
us."
right.
It's usually not the first thing. So what I found is that you have to paint that end state of what it is you're looking to achieve, at what's at the end of the rainbow. But in my opinion, the way to continue to garner that commitment, that investment, is to do it incrementally. Be smart about what you're asking for, what you're after, what you're able to return back to the organization and ultimately to customers as a result, and continue to build on it. And you'll start to see that multiplier effect kind of happen. And teams will be willing to grasp onto that. They'll be willing to commit to the first stage. And then when they see the first stage proven out, they're going to be like, "Yeah, I want some more of that. I'm
Mhm.
looking like a hero. I'm doing well. So let's get some more of that in play." Right. Um, I think about a use case that kind of maybe paints that picture from my prior days, and let's go back to like the first implementation of chatbot as an example, or virtual assistant. Yeah, I mean, we dreamed up the pie in the sky, wherein that we're going to have this AI enabled super advanced bot that's going to handle inquiry and self-service and personalization and transactions. It's all going to be baked in. um, that is going to take forever, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
so we took a different approach. We painted the picture of what we wanted the future to look like, and then we created the path incrementally how we're going to get there. We're going to start with a few intents. We're going to get those automated, meaningful ones that meant a lot to the customer in terms of self-service, tactical things we could take care of for them. We provide some first efficiency into the organization. Would enter into the market with a virtual assistant. And then we would learn from that, and we'd succeed. We'd expand the intent library. Then we'd work on some transactions, and then we worked in personalization. And we, again, those building blocks continued to happen. And as a result, that was a good use case of kind of that incremental investment, creating incremental return, doing incrementally great things for customers in a digital fashion. You can't do it all at once. It takes time. You got
Yeah.
to approach it in a smart manner. Yeah.
So on the virtual assistant, did you go outside for a partnership for that, or did you try to build things in-house?
Yeah, so very early on, we evaluated all options, building in house, and then working with a couple smaller firms to get started. And we ultimately went the external path to kind of get us going. And then, as time moved on, we kind of moved away. We started managing it internally, expanding on it internally. The platform was still hosted externally,
Mhm.
but yeah. Yeah.
And then was the virtual assistant integrated in for the agents as well? A contextual relationship between what the customer was doing in the virtual assistant to if they needed to talk to an agent, there was some alignment, either they could see the conversation or they had some summary?
Bingo. So we made those transcripts available to agents as part of their incoming interaction, whether it was a chat or it escalated to the voice channel, so that there wasn't a start over point. Right. We knew that was going to be important from the beginning, so that integration was necessary, because otherwise that's frustration for the customer, that's friction for the customer, and nobody wants that. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah.
And how do you think about the organizational structure of your team? How did you pull that together? Was it based on channels? Was it based on journeys? Was it on those priorities? Did you have people working kind of on the today versus the future? How did you approach it?
Yeah, so a couple things. The first thing that we did was, what we did is we looked at who are all those colleagues that have a straight-ish line to the customer. We think about the service center, and we think about the maybe support or those enablement functions. Who's doing your workforce planning, who's doing your quality, who's building your knowledge libraries, who's managing those IVR self-service flows, those bot intents that you're building out. What we wanted to do was bring all of those folks together under common leadership, and really feel like they were leading the charge in that holistic kind of CX and digital journey. um, some cool things happened. I mean, again, you get teams talking that maybe otherwise weren't talking on a daily basis during stand-ups or huddles during the day. You got insights being shared back with call center supervisors that were coming in from folks looking at journey analytics in the bot or otherwise. You're finding new ways to problem solve. I think for customers that was much more efficient than the siloed approach or siloed organization, where maybe some of those things are in global support functions and some of those are just in operational hubs, for example. Um, the other thing that we did, because it's tough. We didn't get everybody under the same umbrella, like be it technology, maybe product management, right? Those are typically entities of their own within a large
Mhm.
organization. But it was super important from the get-go to just create really good partnerships with those teams, make sure that they had a seat at our table and vice versa, we had a seat at their table. On the one hand, you got product folks who are driving maybe a market direction fueled into digital. We wanted that conversation to be happening, and we wanted their feedback and their perspective in addition to what was happening operationally or servicing customers. And then you got tech teams who are actually the ones building, delivering some of these important connections, whatever it might be, to connect the platforms and build out the experiences. So I can't stress the importance of the partnership with maybe groups like those, even if they're not under the same remit, because everyone's after the same thing. It's to serve up really great experiences, advance the digital agenda. That's success for the company, it's success for the people, it's success for customers. So yeah.
Relative to the digital agenda and sort of the call center agenda, I find sometimes there's friction where the call center hears about the digital plans to reduce X number of calls that are coming in, trying to handle tier one level type of inquiries, which would have an effect over time on the size of the call center and what those people are working on. And so there's potentially some conflict. What do you think is the future of the call center versus the digital experience?
Yeah. So I think what I saw happening was very early on some of that skepticism, right? Like, however, as you go down the path and you start to prove out and show the results, and we talked about incremental and incrementally building, right? What we actually found was we would have more need for people working on these projects, supporting these other channels, and we'd actually have interest in people who wanted to make their next move in their career. So it
Mm.
actually ended up, didn't apply to everybody, right? Um, But the other thing that was helpful for us is starting to look at workforce planning holistically across all of the channels, not just the service center. What was happening in uptake on, let's say, the bot and managing two-way interactions via chat potentially. So we were starting to plan holistically, and as we were growing, we were deflecting more to self-service and using that capacity to scale with new growth, rather than adding incremental expense into the operation. Now, there will be a point where that might change, but at least until before I was leaving, we were on a really good trajectory there, where we saw people who were interested in doing this type of work, and they got ported over new roles, and we had growth that was saying we're going to use our existing capacity to scale for that, which is awesome without adding any incremental expense.
So when you first got to Mercer, what was the digital experience like then, and how did you come across like what you were going to focus your improvements on?
Yeah, so that is not a loaded question at all, I guess. Huh? Let's say, if we summed it up, probably like ready for transformation, and probably ripe with a lot of opportunity. As you can imagine, big organization, multiple different business units or business segments. That meant a lot of different experiences. Some were a bit more proficient or mature than others, while others, were kind of just getting going. But either way, there was a need to kind of level up all of them, and I think digital was at the center of that. So, a much more modern digital experience needed to be the focus. So what it kind of looked like was probably a bit of an outdated, web platform serving some basic inquiry transaction stuff, enrolling in your benefits, checking your pension plan, things of that nature. Your service centers were single channel. They were call centers, right? They weren't even multi-channel at that point.
Mhm.
So I think what the effort or the trajectory looked like was the first thing we wanted to get in and do was a overhaul of those self-service digital platforms. Something that was much more modern, better UX, better UI, built on customer and user journeys, understanding where those pain points were in the flow and how do we make it easier, better, et cetera. That took a few years in itself, just given what we were trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, it was a consumer focused, consumer centric type of sites, bringing in things like personalization, guidance into those decision making flows. We had really good educational content, ported in based off of what people's interests were. Mobile responsive at the time, and again, this was a few years back, right? That was
Mhm.
all the rage.
Mhm.
So we tackled that piece first, and then we turned our attention over to the service center. And then two things: one, technology. We needed to round out the tool set internally, round out the tool set externally, and that meant, unifying some CRM platforms, moving into Salesforce, taking a lot of the capabilities from there, and starting to build those other channels into the mix. We then did some work with our IVR and restructured that whole thing, starting to bring some self-service transactional capabilities and automation into the IVR to reduce some call volume coming in, and whatnot. And then again, kind of just to build on some of that channel experience, was some push notifications, some proactive stuff that was starting to hedge off, things that people probably needed: account updates, status updates, et cetera, and then
Mhm.
build on that. So that was on the technology side, and then on the service center, much of what we just talked about, going down that path of reorganizing the teams, and then once we were doing that, looking at internal type of processes that were right in front of us for automation potentially. How do we make our colleagues' lives easier, and how do we speed up some processes that were otherwise a little bit archaic potentially? So that was kind of the path, with it concluding on what I'd say is more modernization. Took a look at some of the older infrastructure that was sitting in the house and said, it's time to get to the cloud. That's going to open up a whole new avenue of opportunities with AI, digital, data integrations, everything under the sun. And that was a great experience, getting out of that that constrained on-prem infrastructure to a cloud-based one connected to Salesforce. Everything was humming along really great. So
That's great. That's great. And
yeah.
how did customers react to the digital experiences?
It was like Christmas Day, but every day for at least a leader like myself looking at results. We were keeping an eye on what was happening, day over day, week over week, month over month, and we kind of saw the trifecta of good stuff happening. We saw digital utilization increasing. When we started with that bot being implemented, we were maybe funneling 10% of interactions through to digital channels. By the time I had left, we were upwards of 40-50% between bot, IVR, self-service webs, the whole kit and caboodle. Like we were really moving things in that direction where people were taking advantage of it. It meant they were hungry for it, I think. We every day we'd keep an eye on CSAT, NPS, and what was happening there, and the team took pride in like reviewing. Hey, these were the negative scores. These were detractors. We were going to follow up. We were going to figure out what was wrong. We were going to make it right, and we are going to put those learnings into practice day in and day out to make it better. Moved from sub 95 CSAT scores to upwards of 98. Which is a big move based on 500, 600,000 interaction surveys each year to get there. So it was great to see. I think that customers were responding well to those channels, what we were doing there, and the improvements in the measurements. But on the flip side, for the business, we were seeing the efficiencies. We were taking costs incrementally out of the operation organization. Smartly. We weren't doing it and putting pressure on the teams to keep pace. It was done in exchange with the good returns that we were seeing, with volume reduction or whatnot, and colleagues are feeling good. So we had customers happy, we had the business happy, we had colleagues saying that they were engaged, they were proud to be part of the work, they saw the changes we were making. So yeah, it was good. It was it convinced me, if I wasn't already convinced of that, when you focus on taking care of your customers, you're going to in turn take care of your business. You're going to take care of your people. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
One area that's been sort of a pet peeve of mine is to understand root cause of a call. And in relation to how you can take that call out.
Yeah.
And what was your process to do that? It's not just the quality of the call, which is important, looking at the agent, do they have the right answers, right? But the really questioning, why did that call happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
And where is the problem, and what or the challenge, and what can I do about it?
There were a few things that we did to dig in, and there are some things that were on the radar that I think are underway now, which are probably a little bit more intelligent, using data, using AI. So what we did at the time, we were just combing data and finding out where we had multiple interactions within X amount of time frame. What could we extract from CRM notes, or what could we extract from any notes that we had documentation on, and then we do a little bit of sample analysis on calls, and we try to kind of piece together, okay, if we were able to get in front of serving this type of thing up maybe on the web, like for example, some of this led back to, well, I went to the website and I couldn't find this, so I had to call. And there was no chat available, and there was no chatbot of it. So, again, if we started core with just being able to get what we needed on the web, that would solve the problem. Bill pay for certain policy types. It's a complex environment, complex, record keeping systems, etc. It was tough to get bill pay on the website for certain types of policies. But we found that we had enough people calling that it was worth the effort to go ahead and do that. Yeah. Thus not needing to initiate that call. So I'd say it was grunt work, really, to dig and find early Where what we were exploring, and I'm pretty sure is happening now, is leveraging some of the conversational or speech analytics offered now through some of the cloud service providers and whatnot to do that. I'd say without as much legwork as we took at that time. But it really was, get a shovel and start digging, and then and start to understand. What it was, those proactive notifications, same type of thing. How many people were calling to check if their case was resolved? Well,
Right.
first thing was, okay, let's get them a notification that we're still working on it, number one, or we actually solved it and here's the reason why. But then we would go a layer deeper and say, did a case need to be opened at all for some reason? And then we might go try to solve that via better self-service functionality to start with, or maybe a downstream or an upstream process that needed to be retooled. So it was manual labor, 100%.
Well, I feel your pain, and I know many
Yeah.
out there also feel your pain.
Yeah, there's those. I mean, again, and I know you're a big proponent of just the same. There's probably some self-help tools just by starting to think about mapping out what your customer journey is. Just get a handle on that. That's going to be your starting point, right? Like, if you think about where in there are those, either big moments or smaller moments that are likely to cause some type of confusion, potentially some pain in the process. We're all consumers. We need to put that lens on it and then kind of say, that could lead us to point, A or B potentially. But that's step one. And before you even start looking at data, do you understand what the journey is altogether? Because if you don't, then you're just digging in a haystack potentially.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities along the customer journey in health insurance and retirement? So where are there friction points today that
Yeah.
can be improved?
I think, and given I just listened to the recent podcast with David, I'm going to steal a bit from his because I think he was spot on. I mean, it's the amount of complexity in the system, in what's happening in this space with respect to health insurance needs, retirement needs. I think people are looking for it to be simpler, and despite a lot of effort, it's kind of not getting too much simpler, or might be even getting more complex.
Mhm.
And at the same time, right, individuals are getting that much more savvy with their more well-known or traditional type of consumer journeys like telecom, retail, travel. I mean, all that's making just huge headway in making it as simple as possible. And in the insurance space or in retirement space, it's still pretty difficult. It's not common dinner table talk and whatnot. So I think there's a couple of things. One is the industry really needs to continue to keep a lens on what's happening in the more traditional consumer space and pick up all those bags of goodies and start to introduce them into their offering, like the brass tacks stuff. Like when people need help, they do want to be able to go find it on their own. Not a whole lot of people like to pick up the phone. So if you don't have those self-service channels in place fueled by digital, you're kind of probably already making it a little bit more difficult than you need to. And there's other examples in there, but I think again, we need to leverage all the good stuff that's happening in some of those more traditional, well-known, because customers know it, they're empowered by it, and they have the expectation of it. And we need to port that over here. I think the other probably thing that I would call most attention to in this space is the need for guidance
Mm.
in when making important decisions, and that can be either in a self-service driven flow powered by digital, or it could even be on an agent side or a sales side. I think people are hungry for guidance that is going to make them feel a bit more confident in the decisions they're making, be it the program I'm enrolling in, what I need to use, or how I can use my plans when I need to, either be the doctor or hospital services. On the retirement side, am I properly understanding when I should start to draw down my pension plan, or think about what's happening in my 401k, and when and how to utilize that stuff. So I think that's probably the biggest opportunity, like, is to continue to evolve the capability to build out guidance for people who need to make these types of decisions, and it's not simple stuff. And the more better we can do that, the better we can, focus on what matters to them, utilize emerging technologies, more data, more AI, et cetera. The better we're going to get at that.
So yeah, building a more personalized, proactive experience based on knowing this customer, where they've been, what they've done, and maybe it's an age-based type of thing that you start communicating to them about it at 55, that these things are coming up. And it's
Yep.
kind of similar to the onboarding side. I think onboarding for a lot of these is like pick your plan and move on, start putting money in. But then there's
Yeah.
the other side of it, which is the utilization of what you've accumulated over time.
That's right. That's right. And that can apply to your traditional savings vehicles in the retirement space. It could, port over to health savings accounts that you're accumulating for healthcare needs in retirement. Like, there's a lot to tackle there, and more of that personalized approach with some level of kind of expert assistance, expert guidance built in that doesn't feel generic. It feels, tailored for somebody based on what that company knows about them. So there's,
Got it.
yeah.
So we've talked a bit about AI. I'm a big fan of AI. We're still in the very early stages. Where do you see AI as an opportunity in the future for this market?
Yeah, I think it's exactly where you were going. It's using it on the front end. I think to help individuals make those better decisions, aggregating data, intelligently running probably some pretty complex algorithms that the typical back end might be a little sluggish to do, and kind of outputting based on a much larger set of data things that might be beneficial for someone, based on their personal needs and their personal demographics or their situation. So I think AI is gonna and is starting to already play a huge kind of play in that space. I think the other thing that we started to dip our toes in and is happening as well is in the back office,
Mm.
behind the scenes, right? Like, the things that it can do for agents in auto, maybe summarization and classification of customer, conversations, straight through, and then building that through straight through processing or automation for any kind of tier two type of support. Um, same would go for data reconciliation on the back end. You think about the amount of data being exchanged between parties in this space. It's potentially ripe for error, and when there's a problem, it potentially means like maybe someone like you or I, we might need to go to the doctor and our coverage isn't on file and we might get denied services, right?
Mm.
That could happen, but with some advanced AI in place, doing some more complex quality controls, and surfacing things that might need attention before they come problems based off of other trends or algorithms, like it's going to solve a lot of downstream for both the company, inefficient processes, but also frustration for a customer of these types of products. So
I've seen recently some digital human AI experiences that are uh, proposing that they can replace the human in a call center, um, to bring what I think is missing and has always been a challenge in digital is that connection with the customer, the empathy and the trust. Um, Two questions. One, do you see a future for those? And two, what do you think about bringing empathy and trust into the digital experience?
yeah, it's it's tough. I don't think, and one guy's opinion, but I don't think we'll ever fully replace the need for human led assistance in this, maybe just in this space at least. I mean, it's. I mean, I've listened to calls where you have retirees trying to make decision about Medicare, for example, and the complexity and the amount of empathy that some of these consultants, these agents put into helping these individuals get what they need to be taken care of, to make sure that their wallet is taken care of and to make sure their healthcare is taken care of.
Mhm.
I'm not sure we'll find a place where it's full. I do think that there's a lot of opportunity to introduce more of that to handle um, maybe some more of the routine stuff, and in a way that can make the right handoff. So I do think there's a place. Will it ever fully replace? I'm not. I'm skeptical on that because I just think there's a level of care that's probably needed in this space that we're never going to get to that as much as we serve up what we can to kind of advance that fully digital agenda. You know.
Yeah. I see you're in New Hampshire in your RV here, enjoying the summer, and I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time to give us, some of your experience and guidance. I think it was extremely helpful,
Cool.
and thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Mark, and best of luck with all the future DCX content and podcasts to come.
Thanks so much.
All right.